Check this out. The Washington Post accusing me of warmongering for saying maybe the U.S. should consider a preemptive strike on North Korea. Now, Gina, the point is and was, wouldn't taking out their missile sites before they launch missiles at the U.S. help protect America?
Oh, come on, Eric. Stop using common sense. We should just draw artificial lines all over the sand, right? Like Obama did, that have absolutely zero effect and that only embolden our enemies and these horrible human tragedies like the ones that occur in North Korea. Listen, this week we watched the very, very upsetting death of Otto Warmbier, and he is the tip of the iceberg in terms of what happens in North Korea on a daily basis. And so if Americans want to talk about being humanitarians, this is the place to start.
Yeah, and Lisa, over the last few years, especially under President Obama, the testing of North Korean nukes got bigger and bigger and bigger. It started around 2 megatons, and it ended up around 10 megatons. Who knows what they're capable of going forward?
Yeah, it's incredibly alarming, and I think you see the Trump administration very engaged on this issue. But look, I would caution, look, former CIA Director Michael Hayden had said that North Korea is the most difficult intelligence target because there's so much we don't know about what their nuclear capabilities are. And I would also caution, look, I'm certainly no military analyst, but I do trust Mad Dog Mattis, and he testified before the Appropriations Committee very recently in saying this is not a war we want with North Korea, and we would see casualties like anything we haven't seen before since 1953, because you look at the population-dense centers in South Korea of Seoul, you look at Japan, you know, again, another dense population area, so we would see mass casualties potentially there. So I trust Secretary Mattis, and if this is a guy who says that he doesn't, you know, nothing keeps him up at night, he keeps others up at night, and he is saying very clearly and testifying that this is not a war we want, I trust his judgment on that. Right.
And Mercy, the point wasn't that we strike a nuclear war with North Korea, because that wouldn't be good for anyone. My point was, hey, why don't we take out some of these missile launching capabilities of North Korea before they send one over our way?
Right, and I think that's, you know, Eric, it's very complicated, and I think part of it is the fact that there is this sense coming from the U.S. Missile Defense Agency as well as from the Department of Defense, where they are concerned. They're already assuming that North Korea at some point will be able to launch an intercontinental ballistic missile. And they're trying to prepare with the anti-missile defense system in the United States, which, as we saw, they just failed in trying to shoot down a missile in one of our practice tests. So I think that, you know, I think that for the Trump administration, all options are on the table. I think that they're running into this very difficult challenge where they were putting pressure on China to act in basically controlling the North Korean toddler dictator, and that's not happening. And so you're going to see that they're going to reevaluate this. I think the biggest concern there, Eric, is they don't want this to escalate to the point that we do end up in a very expensive and serious war.
That's the point. I'm going to bring it to David. David, there's been nothing but escalation from the North Koreans, especially over the last couple of years. As I said, the testing has become bigger and bigger, and now we have a report that they're testing an engine that can deliver a warhead to our continent, most likely our West Coast.
Well, if I might urge caution in going to war being as a preemptive strike, that also be a course of last resort. And that being said, we have to think about South Korea, our ally there, that the minute we may be striking missile sites in North Korea, Seoul is 3 miles from the demilitarized zone.
35 miles. 35 miles.
35 miles, excuse me. And so what happens when, what strike do we are we going to see on Seoul, putting a city of civilians at risk as well? So there are trade-offs here, and we got to be very careful on what the costs are to
David,
our allies.
let me stay with, hold on, guys. Let me stay with you for 1 second here. In 1980, the Israelis were looking for the U.S. to help them out because Iran and Iraq were developing missile programs, and they were concerned, and the Israelis went in and took out some Iraqi nuclear sites on their own preemptively, and guess what? World War III didn't start that day.
Well, I'm not saying that we're trying to prevent World War III. I am saying that there are other means working with our allies. Let's not forget that China or North Korea is China's one of their largest trading partners. So they have incentive just as we do.
But it's not enough, David. China is, they are the only ones capable of disarming North Korea. Obviously, they're not keeping their promise in pushing these international sanctions in a serious way. And obviously, President Trump pointed that out recently, that we were hoping to see China take more aggressive action against North Korea. It's been very minimal what we're seeing.
And what happens, Mercedes, when we then hit or strike North Korea? What then happens with China's reaction, the destabilization in the region? Then you have escalation. Right. For sure.
Well, two quick things here. When I was talking earlier, even with the mass casualties, I wasn't even talking about, a nuclear war per se. I mean, any sort of escalation, any sort of war could potentially bring mass casualties to our ally, South Korea. But look, I also think we have to keep in mind regarding China, it's also in China's best interest, and they don't want escalation with North Korea either, because one, they don't want a mass refugee crisis from North Korea, and two,
they want North Korea, Lisa.
But what'd you say? No,
you can't get out of North Korea.
No, but they also want North Korea to serve as a buffer between South Korea and the United States as well.
Let me,
there is interest there with China.
Guys, hold on. I want to bring this to Gina. Gina, we have about a minute left. You can take this home. If I'm wrong and we don't need to do a preemptive strike, how in the world, what are the sanctions we need to get in place, and how are we going to get them in place, and by whom?
Well, I think that President Trump has taken some great steps in that direction. First of all, demonstrating that he was willing, of course, to speak with China and to have a sort of a different relationship with China than President Obama had ever had. And then President Trump's tweets about this, saying kind of, hey, we had this conversation, China, we need you to be tougher. But also, and I think critically, are the steps that the president took just this week or last week with Cuba. Cutting off, Cuba being one of the biggest trading partners with North Korea. This is the beginning of a stranglehold on them in ways they're not going to like.
Enough,
and you know that President Trump is not going to sit down with it.
You got to sanction the Chinese banks. That's one place to start where they have these close ties to North Korea. You've got to keep putting pressure on China. This is not going to be easy, especially when you have South Korea's president, a progressive, trying to have these talks with North Korea. It's really putting the United States in a difficult bind.